This is the story of a forgotten chapter in history, a challenging occupation that left a lasting mark on the heart of Africa. It was called a civilizing mission, but the reality was a foreign control that deeply affected the lives of the people. For decades, the history of the French presence in Chad has been overlooked. It's a story of a strict colonial administration during a desert conquest and a life under external control for the Chadian people who faced significant hardships. This is the story of the French conquest of Chad. For 60 years, its people experienced life under colonial authority, enduring difficult conditions in the name of empire. But what happened when they finally achieved independence? Today, we examine the lasting impact of France's presence on the nation, a legacy that has influenced Chad's development for generations. This is the story of how a country was governed under colonial rule and the long journey toward independence. We will also explore the origins of the Chadian nation, uncover the narratives that shaped its colonial history, and reveal the truth behind Chad's long, challenging path to freedom. This is the story of Chad, France's scar. Hello friends, I am Czar. Welcome to episode 12, French invasion in Chad and the long struggle for independence. I'll keep sharing these stories, so don't forget to subscribe, like, share, and comment. The origins of the Chadian people form a rich and complex tapestry woven from three major historical threads: ancient indigenous civilizations, powerful Sahelian empires, and migrations of nomadic peoples from the Sahara. For millennia, Chad has been a crossroads connecting North Africa, the Nile Valley, and sub-Saharan Africa. The earliest known complex society in the region was the Sao civilization, which flourished south of Lake Chad from approximately the 6th century BC to the 16th century AD. They were a sophisticated people known for building impressive fortified cities out of earth and creating unique terracotta and bronze artwork, especially stylized human and animal figurines. The modern Sahara people, who are the largest ethnic group in southern Chad today, are believed to be descendants of the ancient Sao. The history of Chad was shaped by the rise and fall of powerful empires that controlled the valuable trans-Saharan trade routes. The Kanem-Bornu Empire, circa 700 to 1893, was the most dominant and long-lasting empire in the region. Originating east of Lake Chad, it was founded by the Kanembu people. At its height, it governed a vast territory covering parts of modern-day Chad, Nigeria, Niger, Libya, and Cameroon. The empire became a major center of Islamic learning, and its people, the Kanuri, descendants of the Kanembu, remain a significant ethnic group in the Lake Chad area. As the power of the Kanem-Bornu Empire fluctuated, two other influential Islamic sultanates emerged to its east: the Kingdom of Bagirmi, circa 1522 to 1897, and the Wadai Empire, circa 1635 to 1912. These kingdoms, founded by the Bagirmi and Maba peoples respectively, were major regional powers that often competed with each other and with Kanem-Bornu for control of trade and territory. The northern Saharan part of Chad has been home to nomadic and semi-nomadic peoples for centuries. An ancient nomadic group indigenous to the Tapestry Mountains in northern Chad, the Tubu are known for their strong independence and remarkable to thrive in one of the world's most challenging environments. Over many centuries, various Arabic-speaking groups migrated into the Sahelian belt of Chad from the north and east, primarily as nomadic cattle herders. They introduced their language and culture, which blended with the existing societies. The French desert conquest of Chad occurred through a series of prolonged military campaigns from roughly 1900 to 1920. This was not a single event, but a gradual process of establishing colonial control over powerful sultanates and nomadic communities across a vast and challenging terrain. The administration relied on three main factors: advanced weaponry, highly mobile military units, and a strategy aimed at asserting authority across the region. The initial phase of the conquest focused on the organized Islamic kingdoms in the more populous Sahelian belt south of the Sahara. Battle of Kuno, October 29, 1899. The French first had to confront the leader Rabi az-Zubair, who had established his own empire around Lake Chad. A French force under Émile Gentil engage Rabi's army. While the French succeeded, they encountered significant challenges and losses. The most complex part of the desert conquest was establishing control over the powerful Wadai Empire, which governed eastern Chad. The campaign in Wadai was not about traditional battles, but rather a long process of consolidating authority. French units, often composed of Senegalese tirailleurs, advanced into Wadai territory. Any resistance was met with strong military pressure. Villages and farmland were frequently targeted to encourage compliance with colonial rule. By 1909, the French captured Abéché, the capital of the Wadai Empire, and installed a puppet sultan. Nevertheless, local resistance continued for several years, requiring the French to maintain a prolonged military presence until around 1912. The final phase involved extending control over the vast, sparsely populated Saharan North, home to the nomadic Tubu and Tuareg peoples. The French established highly mobile camel-mounted units called Maoris, capable of traveling long distances across the desert to monitor and manage nomadic movements. By controlling key oases and water points, which were essential for desert survival, the French were able to assert authority over the region. The process of bringing the northern desert regions, particularly the Tapestry Mountains, under colonial administration was long and challenging and was not fully completed until around 1920. Life for the Chadian people under French rule was marked by strict administration, economic exploitation, and an ideology of imperialism. Chad was treated as one of the most tightly controlled and strategically managed territories within the French Empire. Harsh colonial administration and forced labor. After the conquest, French rule was maintained through a system designed to extract resources, particularly cotton, using the local population as a labor force. This became a central feature of daily life. The French colonial administration conscripted hundreds of thousands of Chadian men, requiring them to leave their farms and villages to work on cotton cultivation, road construction, or military supply efforts. Working conditions were extremely difficult, with many facing exhaustion, malnutrition, and disease. The French also imposed a heavy head tax that had to be paid in French currency. Since most Chadians were subsistence farmers who did not use cash, this tax effectively forced them to participate in the labor system to earn the necessary funds. Chadians were not considered French citizens, but subjects, governed by a separate and discriminatory legal system. This gave French administrators broad authority to punish individuals for minor infractions, creating a system of strict and arbitrary control. Methods of control. Maintaining authority relied heavily on strict enforcement. During the initial conquest, particularly the campaign against the Wadai Empire, 1909 to 1912, French military units applied strong pressure to encourage compliance with colonial rule. Communities that resisted were often subjected to the destruction of property, including crops and infrastructure, to assert control and enforce obedience. Routine administration also included punitive measures for those who did not pay taxes or participate in assigned labor. Colonial guards sometimes used public punishment to enforce regulations and maintain order. The French military and administrative methods during the conquest and subsequent governance represented a system of strict control that by today's standards would be considered highly oppressive. Role of missionaries in imperial ideology. The entire colonial project was justified by the ideology of imperialism, specifically the French civilizing mission, mission civilisatrice. Ideological justification. This was the belief that France had a duty to uplift African peoples according to European standards. While framed as a moral obligation, this ideology provided cover for the strict economic control and heavy-handed administration that shaped colonial life in Chad. Role of the missionaries. Missionaries, particularly active in the southern animist regions of Chad, played a central role in this project. They established schools and clinics, providing education and medical care. At the same time, their work promoted the French language, values, and cultural norms while discouraging local traditions and religions. Their efforts supported the broader colonial system and helped integrate the population into the framework of French rule. The final phase of French rule in Chad did not end with a dramatic liberation struggle, but rather through a political process that led to independence. This transition left behind a nation challenged by divisions and a legacy of deeply entrenched administrative control. The bitterness of this period reflects the enduring impact of decades of strict governance, economic pressure, and cultural assimilation policies. Chad's path to independence. Chad's path to independence was shaped not by a battlefield victory, but by political decisions made in Paris. After World War II, a small French-educated elite began forming political parties, with François Tombalbaye, a Protestant trade unionist from the South, emerging as the most prominent leader. France, weakened and under pressure to decolonize, offered its colonies a choice through a referendum. Chad, under Tombalbaye's leadership, voted to become an autonomous republic within the French community. On the surface, this marked a peaceful transition from colonial rule, but the reality was more complicated. François Tombalbaye, a teacher and trade unionist from southern Chad, became the head of the main political party, the Chadian Progressive Party, PPT, just before independence. When France agreed to grant sovereignty to its African colonies, Tombalbaye was in power. On August 11, 1960, he declared Chad's independence and became the nation's first president. While he is recognized as the father of independence, Tombalbaye's legacy is complex. He moved quickly to establish a one-party state, banning other political parties, and implemented policies that favored his own ethnic groups in the South. This created tensions with the Muslim populations in the North and deepened regional divides that had roots in the colonial period. These political and social tensions contributed to the outbreak of the First Chadian Civil War in 1965, marking the beginning of a long period of internal conflict that affected the nation for decades. Because of this, François Tombalbaye is remembered both as the leader who guided Chad to independence and as a figure whose rule highlighted the challenges of building unity in a newly independent nation. The bitter legacy, a nation shaped by division. France did not leave behind a stable, unified nation. Instead, it left a state that was structurally divided, ensuring that the end of its direct rule marked the beginning of new challenges for Chad. The North-South divide. This was perhaps the most enduring impact. Colonial development, education, and political power were concentrated in the Christian and animist South, while the Muslim North received little investment or support. At independence, political power was handed exclusively to the Southern elite under François Tombalbaye, creating a situation in which Northern communities felt marginalized and politically sidelined. A legacy of authoritarian administration, French rule focused on economic extraction and maintaining control rather than building local institutions. As a result, the newly independent Chadian state inherited limited experience with inclusive governance, and Tombalbaye's government quickly adopted centralized and authoritative methods similar to the colonial model. The First Civil Conflict, 1965. Just 5 years after independence, tensions over taxes and centralized authority led to a revolt in the North. This unrest evolved into the First Chadian Civil War, 1965 to 1979, a prolonged internal conflict between the central government in the South and Northern opposition groups. The challenges facing Chad after independence reflected the deep structural and social divisions created during the colonial period. Enduring impact. As of 2025, the legacy of French colonialism continues to influence Chad's political and social landscape. Internal divisions, underdevelopment, and chronic governance challenges are part of the inheritance left by decades of colonial administration. A divided colony, the French governed Chad effectively as two separate regions. The more fertile, Christian, animist South received investment in cotton cultivation, schools, and administrative institutions, while a southern elite was cultivated to manage colonial operations. At independence, exclusive power was handed to the southern elite, leaving the North politically and economically marginalized. This structural imbalance laid the groundwork for recurring conflicts, including the First Chadian Civil War, and has influenced much of the country's subsequent history. France's goal in Chad was not nation-building, but territorial control and resource extraction. The consequences of this approach remain evident in the country's ongoing struggles, making this the most profound and lasting legacy of the colonial era. Colonial governance and economic legacy. The French governed Chad not through civil institutions, but through strict administrative and military control. The primary tools of rule included military campaigns, forced labor, and the Code de l'Indigène, which allowed authorities to enforce regulations and punishments without standard legal procedures. This approach left Chad with little tradition of democratic governance, debate, or peaceful transfers of power. The newly independent state inherited a system where political authority was closely tied to military strength, a pattern reflected in Chad's later history of coups, authoritarian regimes, and the central role of the army in politics. Economic impact. The colonial economy was designed for extraction. France oriented Chad's economy around cotton production for French textile industries, undermining local food security and creating dependency. Infrastructure was built primarily to transport cotton and support military operations, leaving Chad at independence with limited paved roads, minimal healthcare facilities, and one of the lowest literacy rates in the world. This economic structure persists today. Chad remains heavily reliant on exporting raw materials, now primarily oil, while domestic industry and economic diversification are limited. Artificial borders and ethnic divisions. The borders of Chad were drawn by French administrators without regard for existing ethnic, cultural, or political realities. These arbitrary lines split ethnic groups and combined historical rivals into a single state, creating long-term sources of internal tension and cross-border disputes with neighbors like Libya, Sudan, and Nigeria. Military campaigns and control. Historical accounts show that French forces relied on strict military measures to establish control over powerful states, including the Wadai Empire, 1909 to 1912. The conquest was not a conventional war between armies, but a campaign to enforce compliance across the population. When communities resisted, French military units conducted operations to restore authority, often causing widespread disruption, destruction of property, and civilian displacement. Colonial strategies and economic impact. During the French colonial period, military operations and administrative policies caused widespread disruption across Chad. Villages were destroyed, crops were lost, and livestock was seized as part of a strategy to enforce compliance and control. These measures created significant hardship, including food shortages and population displacement. Individuals suspected of resisting colonial authority could face severe punishment without standard legal procedures. These measures were used to suppress opposition and maintain centralized control over the territory. Economic dependence. French colonial policies created a highly dependent economy. This situation was reinforced after independence by the neo-colonial France-Afrique system and the CFA franc, ensuring that much of Chad's wealth continued to flow outward. The bitter freedom of independence marked the beginning of a new phase in managing these economic challenges. France has never provided direct monetary compensation or reparations to Chad for the exploitation and hardships experienced during the colonial period. While there has been no official apology or financial reparation for the colonial period, the relationship between France and Chad after independence has been shaped by significant financial and military support. This support is framed as aid and partnership rather than compensation. The most notable aspect of this relationship has been military assistance. Since Chad's independence in 1960, France has intervened at times to support and protect the central government in N'Djamena during periods of internal unrest. This ongoing involvement, sometimes controversial, is part of the system known as France-Afrique. It reflects France's strategic interest in the Sahel region rather than any formal reparation for colonial-era policies. Chadian migration to France. According to the latest statistics, approximately 14,000 people born in Chad currently live in France. Including French-born children and grandchildren, the total population of Chadian origin is estimated to be between 30,000 and 40,000. This diaspora is a direct legacy of the colonial period, as Chad was once part of French Equatorial Africa. Migration continued after independence for work, education, and for those seeking safety due to political instability within the country. The French flag was eventually lowered, but the legacy of colonial rule continues to shape Chad. Many of the challenges the country faces today, economic hardship, regional divisions, and political instability, can be traced back to this period of occupation. France is no longer present, but the impact of its administration remains. This concludes episode 12 on the French Empire in Chad. Your subscriptions, likes, and shares motivate me to continue exploring the hidden truths of our modern history. See you in the next episode. Take care and goodbye.